Welcome to the Edge of Greatness podcast. The path to greatness is never linear and requires patience and consistency. Join us on our journey as we peel back the layers of success, searching for that elusive core. Each week we will explore a different component of greatness, utilizing experts who have traveled some part of the path that we are all on. We aim to uncover insights into the areas of leadership, coaching, performance, overcoming failure, the power of habits, and so much more. We are all on the edge of greatness. Hello and welcome to the Edge of Greatness podcast. I'm your host, Charles Schultz, and today I've got a very special guest with me. Her name is Jenny Rearick. She is the owner of Fit to Speak, a company designed to help people communicate better and more efficiently, as well as improve their presentation skills. So, Jenny, thank you so much for taking some time today to come and join me.
Very excited to be here. Thank you, Charles.
Absolutely. So, ever since you said you were willing to come onto the show, I had a question that has been like burning in my mind, and it comes down to the fact that do you find challenging about working and coaching communication in a world that's so screen oriented and lack of communication based?
What do I find challenging? That's a great question. I think what I find most challenging is that technology is fast, cheap, and easy.
Yeah.
And when that happens, people feel compelled to communicate in that same way. And so we almost spend too much time talking and not enough time listening. We're constantly focusing on putting stuff out and continuing to put stuff out. And it's more about quantity than it is about quality. So I think with the people I work with most, that's something that I'm constantly preaching is it's not about saying something because you can. You should wait to say something until you've got something that you feel will contribute or add value to whomever you're trying to serve.
I absolutely love that, because I think that you're very on point when it comes to the fact that people just want to, I think, hear their voice because they don't use it enough. So when they get into a conversation, it turns into either a one-sided yelling match, depending on the emotion of the conversation, or they don't listen and wait for their turn to give information back and forth.
That's right.
Yeah,
well, and especially in social media, what I'm seeing is we're just inundating people with information, but we're not taking the extra step of telling them why that information should matter to them, why they should care, how it will benefit them. And so that's where that white noise starts to come in, where it's in one ear, out the other, because we're not taking that extra step to tell the story behind the value of the information that we're sharing. We're just giving them process-oriented information.
Right. So we're just looking for the quick, easy snippet versus the in-depth, valuable nuggets that we can kind of give to people. Right.
That's right. Yes.
Okay. Love that. So I was also paying attention when I was looking at your website. It said that you were kind of like accidentally thrust into the communications world. And I'm curious, kind of tell me a little bit about how that happened for you.
Yes. Prior to what I am doing now, I was running a project management team at a digital advertising agency. That's what I had been doing for 10 years, working on huge businesses, PlayStation, Emerson, Darden restaurants. It was a lot of fun and I was good at it. What I was realizing after so many years is that although I enjoyed it, it was in no way fulfilling for me. At that same time, I was on a trip in Alaska randomly, and an acquaintance of mine, her family owns a communications and public speaking business. During a conversation on the trip, she had mentioned that they were looking to bring someone on because they were growing their business, and asked if I would be interested in attending one of their programs and potentially joining their team. Now, she and I had met. I was coaching group fitness classes, and she saw me coaching, which is why she thought that I would be a good addition to their team. Long story short, I took their program. I absolutely loved it, and it started making a big difference in how effective I was in my corporate job. So over the course of several months, I started consulting with them, and then I ended up leaving my job in advertising and taking a full-time role with them. So since then, full-time, I teach people how to create and deliver presentations, speeches. I teach people how to listen better, have feedback conversations, mostly in the corporate space. And then in the last year or so, I've then transitioned to do supplementary work with coaches and trainers and practitioners in the health space to bring some of the skills that I'm learning over here over to them as well, because I don't see a lot of that happening in our space.
Yeah, no, I find it interesting because the coaching aspect is obviously something that I'm involved in. And as we were talking before we got started recording, I feel like we have a tendency as coaches to try to deliver information, but we don't do it in a way that everyone always understands. We're always just trying to talk, and then we end up talking over a situation while we're trying to teach something. And some people get it, some people don't. Some people aren't even listening anymore because you are just constantly trying to deliver a message. And so talk to me a little bit about how you work with coaches to help them understand how and when to deliver a proper message when it comes to, working with teams and in that kind of setting.
Communication is most effective when it's going to address some type of existing problem or opportunity. That's typically when messages make sense, or if our intention is to elevate somebody's knowledge or educate them in some way as a way to fill some type of gap that we've come to realize. When you choose to communicate, it should always be driven by you having a purpose, and those are your purposes. It's either because you're trying to help somebody know something or you're trying to get them to do something. And if you're not motivated by one of those two purposes, it's safe to assume that whatever you're messaging is you just doing so for your own sake to put something out there that's not necessarily, again, going to add value. And if we are constantly just talking and talking and talking, when we do then have something important that we need to say, it's watered down because it's surrounded by just a constant stream of information. When I work with coaches, whenever they communicate that they want to share a message in whatever way that looks like, my question to them is always, what problem are you addressing? What are you trying to educate them on? When these people walk away from listening to you, what will the one thing be that they know, or what are they going to do? And if you can't articulate that clearly and simply, my challenge to them is always you're too broad, or this is too big, or you're not going in with a purpose. And what people know when we're communicating without a purpose, they walk away from our conversations and they think, I have no idea what point she was trying to make. I don't get how this helps me and what I'm doing now, because we weren't able to articulate or make that connection for them. So to round it all out, or to simplify my answer, I would just say the number one thing that I work with coaches on is to help them understand the importance of being able to define their purpose before they decide to communicate.
I like that. Because I feel like when I think about the people who I've enjoyed listening to talk in my life or in the past, either through like an educational TED talk or some type of situation where I'm listening to somebody talk, they usually have a very specific point they're trying to get across. And that's what draws me in. And I think that that's something I lose when I'm giving feedback, is I get caught up giving a feedback originally towards the thing that was on the tip of my tongue or the attention getter, but then I go off on a tangent and start talking about something completely not related to what I was originally trying to correct. And then it turns into, like you said, it waters it down and they get lost along the way. So yeah. Were you going to say?
That's true. A lot of people come to me and they ask me to help coach them on speaking off the cuff. That seems to be something that a lot of people struggle to do. And it's part of it is a skill, in that the more you deliberately practice, meaning when people ask you to speak off the cuff, you have some type of framework that you follow in order to keep your information organized. A lot of it, though, is simply you doing the work to understand the key information within your message and having the courage to leave all of the extra stuff out. We think it's so natural for us to think that in order for people to understand anything, we have to tell them everything. And that's not true, because the minute that the people who are listening to us have to think about what we're trying to say, they just tune us out and they think, this is too much work for me. I don't want to have to try and distill what point they're trying to make. And then they walk away and they don't remember anything about it, or it had no impact on them. And so that was just wasted communication.
Oh, that makes sense. I like that. Do you think that there's some fear involved with people delivering information that they're not giving enough? And so to make up for that, they just continue to talk and then it turns into something that's not related to what the answer was supposed to be. Do you think there's something like that going on with, speaking and delivering a message?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just being a human being, we all want to be perceived as competent, well-spoken, intelligent, authentic when we communicate. And to do that, we think that we just need to tell people everything we know about something, because that will help prove our competence. When in reality, when we do that and we just information dump on people, they don't perceive that as us being competent. They perceive that as us not having thought about them before we communicated. So we weren't able to give them the information that was important to them as an individual person or as a group. And that we didn't put any time or effort into organizing our own thinking before we spoke to them. The less you say, the better it is, because people interpret those who can speak directly as being more clear thinkers. They've thought about what they wanted to say and they've decided on what's nice to know versus what people need to know, and they just tell them what they need to know.
I like that. Yeah. Do you think that that leads into some of the filler words that people have when they have speech patterns? And so instead of just delivering their message and calling it quits, they try to think of more, and then it turns into the likes, and that type of stuff.
Yeah. Filler words happen. If you start paying attention to when they happen, when people are speaking, they almost always happen as people are transitioning between thoughts and sentences in those moments when they're thinking about what they want to say next. And what happens is that our brain works much faster than our mouth moves. Our brain is far ahead and we know what we want to say, but our mouth hasn't finished what we're saying from beforehand. And we use filler words as a bridge to insinuate to people that we're not done speaking, or that we're just in the process of organizing our thoughts. It's a verbal habit that we've picked up on. And because so many of us do it and we're surrounded by it, we're not aware that we're even doing it. And it's so common in our language. The number one thing that I teach people is simply to get comfortable with being uncomfortable in silence. We don't like to be silent while we're speaking to people. We don't like to take pauses in between our thoughts and sentences while we think about what we want to say, because we imagine that the person who's listening to us judges that as us not being prepared. And that's why we can't just continue to speak at this fast pace, or that we're speaking much slower than we actually are. Now, when you speak, as the one speaking, time to the speaker feels very long. When you pause in silence between your thoughts and sentences without using an or an that pause in silence feels like you haven't said something in 10 minutes. It's very uncomfortable to just sit there in silence as you think about what you want to say. However, to people listening to you, that pause and silence hears very quickly. It would be if I asked you right now, in the last minute that I've been talking, have you felt that I paused in silence for too long?
Not too long, but I definitely noticed the pauses because I'm looking for them. And because we're having the conversation about it, I'm aware of it. And it's also something that I've been trying to do myself instead of filling the air with words that don't add value to the conversation.
That's right.
That's the only reason I would notice. If I was just casually listening or not watching you talk and paying attention to how you're delivering your message, then no, I absolutely would not have thought there were breaks in the air. It was just natural.
Right. And it hears very quickly to your listener. It's not that I don't want you to be aware of my pausing. I do, because I'm doing it for your benefit. I'm doing it because When I pause, it almost is like me tripping you, and I regain your attention and I give you time to digest what it is I just said. If I pick up my pace and I speak really fast and I'm going from one word to the next, and then I'm trying to tell you all this information in one thing, and then I've got this other thought over here, and then I want to tell you that, but then I want to tell you this, your brain is saying, that is way too fast. I don't know how to process this. And then you have to cherry pick information that you're going to try and remember. When we speak, it's typically because we feel like we have something important to say, or there's value in what we're saying to the person who is listening to us. If you want people to hear and hang on to what you're telling them, you need to pause more often, because that's the time that people need to take in the information and put it into memory. And at the end of your message, they will retain much more than they would if you were just like a fire hose, giving one sentence after another, after another, after another.
No, I love that you sped your speech up while you were telling that story, because for me, while I was listening to the difference in the sound and the way it was like received for myself. And it almost felt panicked because you were talking at a faster pace during that, even though it was very clear, I could understand what you were saying, but I felt like you were rushing it because your normal cadence is so much easier to digest all the information that's being given. And I think that that's something that's valuable too, is we get excited sometimes when we're talking, and then we start to rush. And then, like you said, we sprint so far ahead that they can't keep up and they lose information. And instead of just waiting to get caught back up by taking a pause, we continue to give it, and then they never catch up and they're always dragging behind.
That's right.
I think that's interesting.
And many people, when they speak, they talk fast because they're afraid that they're going to forget to say something that they felt was important. What I tell those people is that if it was that important, it would have come out, or you will remember it in a few seconds and it will come back, and then you can say it then. Otherwise, my coaching to them would be, write it down somewhere. There's no rule that you have to be this perfect speaker speaking off the cuff all of the time, and that you have your thoughts organized 24/7. Nobody is like that. People who speak well, you don't see all of the background time they spend organizing their thoughts and planning what they want to say. You just get to see the package deal. And then you think, oh, this person's just a natural. That's how they think. They think that clearly. That's not true. If you were to ask them what they did before that, they've probably been spending years or months journaling, saying things out loud, and refining what it is they want to say and the important messages that they want to share. If you struggle to speak off the cuff, my coaching would be, grab one of those little field notebooks, write down important points that you want to make in the middle of your message. If you forget what you were trying to say, there is nothing bad will happen if you pause and you look down at your notes. If something valuable comes out after that pause, people don't care if you spent time writing things down, or that you even had to write things down. Nobody cares about that. All they care about is what ends up coming out and how it matters to them.
Right.
Or the impact that it has on them.
That makes sense. And I think it's funny that you said that when you watch somebody speaking off the cuff or giving a presentation of some sort, and they're flying along in a presentation, and to you, you're like, wow, this person's just incredible. They know everything. This is amazing. But in their mind, because I reverted back to, I spoke at my sister's wedding, and afterwards people were like, wow, that was really good. And you didn't write anything down? And in my mind, I was like, well, I left out 4 different stories I was going to say. And that story was actually supposed to be before that story. So I didn't think it was any good at all, because I totally botched it, but I didn't let it affect the flow. And I came back and told the story out of order, and it still made sense because they didn't know any better.
That's right. I'm so happy you said that, because when I ask people why they're afraid to public speak or do a presentation, the number one answer I get is because I'm afraid I'm going to mess up. And my question is, are you planning to give your written speech or all of your talking points to your audience? And they say, no, of course not. How would they know if you messed up? They don't ever know. Only you know if you left something out or if you said something out of order, but your audience doesn't know, or your listeners don't know what you don't give them.
That makes
sense. Great point.
No, I love that. And as long as you are capable, in my opinion, of tying it back in, it doesn't matter where it goes in the speech. Like you just have to be
Right.
able to articulate how that fit in a different spot. Because like you said,
Exactly.
they don't know when it's coming or why it's coming. So when you work with people, do you feel they want to work with you primarily to help with their public speaking, or is it more like this kind of communication in a like employee employer kind of setting and making sure tasks are done correctly and on time?
Mhm. I would consider what we're doing right now public speaking.
Yeah, that's fair.
And that, I think that's a big mistake that people make is they'll say, I don't need to work with you because I don't have a presentation coming up, or I don't have a speech that I need to do. I'm not going to be speaking up at a meeting anytime soon. But you're public speaking every day. Anytime you speak to anybody outside of your little bubble of your family and your friends, that is public speaking. That is your professional message. When you go into the gym and when you're talking to an existing client, anything that comes out of your mouth is either elevating or taking away from the professional image that you've established with that person that you're communicating with. Most of the people that I work with, they kind of come from all over. I work with corporate executives who do major global presentations, and then I work with people who are in graduate school and they're working on just getting better at improving their off-the-cuff speaking to prepare for interviews that they're going to be doing. I wouldn't say that I have a bread and butter, because there are a set of foundational communication skills that most, I would say 95% of people have never learned, because our educational system isn't set up here, at least not in most schools, to teach people communication skills. They're not the tactical skills of communication. And what I'm seeing in the fitness industry, and then also just in the health and sport industry, is that a lot of the communication information being shared is at a high level, and I would say more psychology based. But I see that as the second step. I think a lot of people are missing the first step, which is, what do you do with your eyes when you communicate? And do you understand why you want to do certain things with your eyes and why you don't want to do certain things with your eyes? Do you understand how to use your gestures to get your message across so that it's easier for people to understand? Do you understand the value of emphasizing and articulating certain points of your speech to get people to pay attention? We just go into conversations and communications winging it. And if it goes really well, I'm like, that's great. But I might ask to the people who come to work with me is, what are you going to do to repeat that? Do you know what you did specifically that you can replicate so that it goes like that every single time? And that's what we're missing. And that's what my mission is to teach people the tactical foundational skills of communication. Because if you know what to do with all of those and you can use them on purpose, it's much easier than to implement some of these high level communication skills when it comes to reading people's personality and being flexible in the way you communicate based on their archetype and things like that. I think that's an advanced skill. I think we all need to develop a little bit more of the foundational skills before we pursue things like that.
Do you think there's something we can do in the schools to help with that? Because I love that we are trying to build better communicators now that we're adults, but I feel like we miss the boat a lot of times because kids get done with high school and college and they don't know how to have just a back and forth interaction. I've had many people come into my gym and ask for a job, and I just want to have a conversation with them about who they are. And I'm like, how do I not know anything about you? We've just talked for 30 minutes and I don't know a single thing. Like, you haven't really even opened up at all. So is there something we can do to help? I've got 2 young kids. They're not even talking yet. So for me, like, when they get older, how can I help them start to develop their communication skills earlier on than waiting until they become an adult?
For you specifically, I have a stepdaughter, my husband Brendan's daughter, her name is Rain. We talked to her about it a lot. Now she's at home and I'm working remotely. Brendan is at home working, and kids pay attention to everything, as I'm sure you know.
Oh,
When
yeah.
she hears me coaching people on this, she asks a lot of questions. She's interested in, why do you use your hands when you talk? Why do you do this? And she sees it. So she provides the questions to me. What I would tell you to do is start talking to your kids about it and saying, I want you to watch me do this podcast, and I want you to see how I'm talking to these people, because this is what you're going to have to do when you grow up. And here are, when you're just having a conversation, you could say, you're not looking me in the eyes, or why don't you try looking me in the eyes so that I have an easier time understanding you. I think finding everyday moments when it's in a safe setting, just to call out certain things and get them thinking about it, can be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the education system, it would be amazing if we built in more of where kids had to share information orally in front of a group of people, because that as soon as you get older, that fear almost feels overwhelming. If we can do it to kids when they're brave and they have the courage to do it, the better. I had dinner with my mentor earlier this week, and she was telling me that her kids are in a private school, and the reason why they sent them to this private school is because the curriculum is built around oral communication. Every single thing, every assignment that these kids deliver, they have to share it orally with the class. And her kids now can get up in front of a group of people and talk, and they're great, and they have no nerves or anything. So it is something that we can teach at a young age, and a lot of us would benefit from it. Unfortunately, that feels like a monster task to change the way the education system works. And so I think your coach, expose your kids to your coaching, but don't assume that they're going to know what to look out for. Talk to them. Say, I want you to pay attention to how I look when I'm speaking to a person one-on-one, what questions I'm asking them, and then have a conversation with them afterwards and have them tell you what they noticed, so you can explain why you do that.
No, I like that. And I think it's really interesting that there's actually a school out there that's working toward an oral delivery of information instead of just filling in the bubbles to whether or not you got the answers right and multiple choice. I think that's I'm really interested to see if they end up finding out that these kids have the ability to communicate more clearly over time, maybe become better public speakers, or somebody who's delivering a larger message because of their skills that they develop. So that'd be a neat study to see sometime down the road, I'm sure.
Right. Well, it just goes to show that the best way to get better at it is to expose yourself to it. And we don't like to be bad at things. Nobody likes to be bad at things. And so what we do is, instead of practicing and saying yes to opportunities because we know that we're not going to be great at it, we just wait until an opportunity comes to us and we say, okay, I'm just going to do it then. But when that opportunity comes and it's one that you're actually excited about, my question would be, wouldn't you want to go in there and have confidence that you're going to do a great job, and not that be the first time you've been exposed to speaking to a group of 100 people? You need to find opportunities that are safe and that there's not a lot. If you fail, it's not a big deal. Maybe a few people will say, well, she's not a great speaker, but who cares? Find places to expose yourself in your community. If you're a gym owner, I would say set up opportunities for your staff to practice this. Maybe every month, say 3 people have to give a 5-minute presentation, or you have to talk about something. You have to come with a message plan, and you're going to stand up in front of the group and just give it to us. And we're going to give you feedback about it. That's a safe environment to practice, but at least you're getting them reps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I like that, because that all relates back to kind of my message is, the reason I started doing this is because so many people see failure as a catastrophic event. They think that it's like the end of the world when they fail at something. And in my opinion, public speaking is seen as this epic opportunity to fail in front of millions of people, when even if it's just like 2 or 3 people listening or talking to you, it just feels so much bigger when it's a communication failure versus just well, I didn't put the right socks on this morning, I failed doing like that's small in the grand scheme of things, or I missed my turn on my way to work. That's a small failure. But for whatever reason, the public speaking one is a huge fear for so many people. But I love that you say the public speaking doesn't have to be a massive group. This is, in my opinion, not public speaking, but you see it as public speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an easy way for people to understand that we can continue to build our communication skills without putting ourselves in a fearful situation.
That's right. Absolutely.
So go ahead. Were you going to add something there?
It's out of my mind. Let's go.
We'll go back to it. Okay.
Yes.
So next question for you. I was wondering, have you been on Clubhouse, or have you heard of Clubhouse yet?
I have an account. I have not participated in anything yet.
So what are your thoughts on that as an opportunity to develop your ability to speak? Because it's literally social media, but with talking. Mm-hmm. And I find it very interesting because we get to have a chance to have conversations and communicate, but it's still a safe environment, mm-hmm. Because you're not face to face. You don't know the people in the group. You might know them through reputation, but you're not standing up in front of the room with all the eyes on you. Do you feel like that's an opportunity for people to practice and get better with their speaking ability?
Absolutely. But only if you know what you're trying to improve on, because exposure is fantastic. Exposure only works if you're going in and you're deliberately trying to make an improvement on a certain element of your communication, because otherwise all you're doing is perfecting errors. Okay. If you don't know what you're doing well and what you're not doing well, you just continuing to do what you're not doing well over and over and over is you just perfecting all the things that you're not doing well. And that's why it's so important to, at some point, either take a communications class, or hire a coach for a certain amount of time, simply to evaluate your communication and to say, you're doing really well here. There's nothing for us to work on here. Here are specific things, tangible skills that you can work on, and here's how to do them the right way. Because then when you get onto these apps, or you have these opportunities to expose your ideas, your message, whatever it might be, you can say, okay, before I open my mouth to speak, I'm going to specifically practice doing this thing, because now it's meaningful practice. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, how do you know you're improving? You're not gauging yourself on anything.
I love that. Yeah, because again, you can't improve at anything, whether it's speech, a sport, training, without having an understanding of what the things you are trying to work on in that moment. And I talk about it all the time in practice, is that I don't care if you do 1,000 reps. 1,000 reps doesn't get you anything. I'd rather you do 5 purposeful reps, right? Versus 1,000 wasted just going through the motion reps.
That's right. I mean, so I played volleyball in college, and I remember one thing specifically was always when I was setting to the outside, I was purposely working on squaring off my hips to the outside. And like you said, I could have practiced just setting to the outside 1,000 times, but I had to say before every single rep, when I get to the ball, I'm going to physically turn my hips so that I'm outside. And then I would do another rep. When I get to the ball, I'm going to physically turn my hips. And then I would either record myself during practice, or my coach would be there to say, you didn't do it, or turn your hips more, turn your hips more. That in the moment coaching needs to happen in order for you to improve. Improvement in your speaking skills requires a fast feedback loop, just like sports do. Mm-hmm. That's why people who choose to improve their communication skills via YouTube videos or books either never improve their skills, or it takes them a really long time. That's because the feedback loop is either non-existent or it's extremely slow. If I was coaching you right now and you started speaking and I heard you using a filler word, I would say, we're going to go back and do that sentence over. When you do it like this, I want you to say it like this. Okay, go ahead and try. And then you would say it again. And I would say, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to go back, repeat that same sentence, but I want you to do it like this time. That's a fast feedback loop. And then what happens is you actually become aware of what you're not doing well. I'm telling you how to do it right. And then you get time to practice it right in that moment, doing it right. And then when you and I weren't together, you could begin to self-correct. Mm-hmm. And if you self-correct over the course of a few weeks, eventually you will become unconsciously competent at those skills, and you'll just do them without having to think about them.
No, that makes sense.
Most people, when they try to improve their communication skills, they're not great at it. And they're realizing that it's not going well. Sometimes they do well, other times they don't. And that's a frustrating process. That's inevitable though, for anybody. It's simply because you're doing things that you're not used to doing. It's unfamiliar territory. It would be the equivalent of if you were playing golf for 10 years and all of a sudden you got this new coach who wanted to change your golf swing. The first few thousand reps that you do, that new golf swing is going to feel wrong to you. That doesn't mean it is wrong. It just means you're not used to doing it that way yet. You do that golf swing for the next 6 months. At that 6-month mark, you'll forget how to do it the old way.
No, it makes, yeah. No, I mean, because I coach hitting. So a lot of times when I make an adjustment in someone's swing, they're like, this just doesn't feel good. I go, does it, take the feeling aside, take it away. Was the result better? They're like, well, yeah.
Right.
I go, do you want to work through the part where it doesn't feel good so that the result happens more often? And most of the time, yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. I was going to say most of the time they say, absolutely, I want that result, but I don't want to feel like this to get that result. And I go, well, then we're going to have to work through the ugly to get to the part where it becomes automated, you know?
That's right. And that's the value of a coach. When you, especially motivated people, they don't like to be bad at things. A coach can be somebody who reminds you of the light at the end of the tunnel, to say, yes, you're not doing well right now, but you're practicing the skill well. It doesn't feel good. I promise you, we're going to keep doing this. At 4 weeks, it's going to feel completely natural to you. You just need to trust me, and we're going to work through this together. And over time, if they put in the reps, they'll notice it for themselves. So I think that's the value of a good coach, is somebody who isn't afraid to make in the moment corrections and to remind the person that they're coaching that uncomfortable period is the period that champions go through to be champions. And the people who aren't champions are the ones who choose to not go through that period of uncomfortable, and they would rather just stick with what they know.
Right. With good enough, we're going to stick with
Exactly.
this is close. I'm almost to where I want to be.
And that totally works. And that's something that I say in communication is nobody ever gets fired for giving a bad presentation. And that's in the business setting. Nobody gets fired unless you were verbally abusing somebody. Nobody gets fired for communicating poorly, not usually.
Right.
But what the hard sell about communication is that you also don't realize how many opportunities aren't coming to you because you're not good at it. And you will never know all of the opportunities that you missed out on simply because you weren't perceived as somebody who was well-spoken, articulate, was a clear thinker, and could deliver a message effectively. That's the hardest sell for me, for people, is you're going to do fine just the way you are. You're not doing it wrong. You could be more effective. And if you're more effective, you're going to, at some point, have more value. You're going to make more money. More people will want to work with you. People will want to hire you.
Yeah, no, I think that's an interesting thought too, because you don't know what you missed out on by being a poor communicator, but you could assume that there's going to at least be a handful of opportunities that you miss. Just like, if you relate it for me back to sports, you don't have to do the little practice sessions, but you may not end up playing next week or the week after. And if you would have never known, like you wouldn't have known any different, that you maybe would have earned your starting spot had you put in 3 more days of practice. Or if you would have done another year of effort, maybe that was your year to make varsity or get your college scholarship or whatever it may have been, but you decided it's been hard to this point and I quit doing the hard stuff and I'm happy with good enough. And you probably end up going on with your life fine.
Right.
But it's amazing how much closer you could have been if you just would have kept sticking with it and continue moving forward with it. So
that's right. And communication is today, I think it's one of the easiest ways to distinguish yourself from everybody. If you are well spoken and articulate, you you are able to organize information in a way that is very simple and makes sense to people. And then you have the confidence to say it out loud simply because you're motivated to just help and serve the people in your community, your professional field, whatever. That is low-hanging fruit for so many people right now, and nobody's pulling on it. Not many people are pulling on it. And yet, when you think about all of the people as a professional, think about all the people that you admire, that you look up to, that you want to work with. I'll bet most of those people are articulate, well-spoken. They have the ability to organize information in a way that makes sense. So you want to develop communication skills for your future self so that one day then you can be that person who people are looking up to and following and wanting to work with.
I do think it's pretty incredible how much a quality delivered message stands out in a crowd of messages.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you are always going to be drawn to the person who communicates better, even if the message of the other person is equal or better. The quality of the message is going to make you go, that person's just good to listen to, right? It draws you in.
Right. And typically those people are also the people that are described as genuine and sincere. We as human beings know when somebody is giving us a scripted message or they're trying to sell us on something. And although they might be trying really hard to sound genuine, it's more of an intuitive feeling. You know right off the bat when somebody's interests are motivated by something other than simply trying to help you, or because they care deeply about you as a person or the field that you're operating in. Genuine and sincere isn't something that can necessarily be taught, but I do think all of these books, like sales books and these communication tactics, they can feel manipulative. And what I like to remind coaches and the other professionals that I'm working with is that your number one job is you're a teacher. If you are going to open your mouth and say something, it's because you know that this is going to help somebody in some way. And if you can hold on to that usually takes away imposter syndrome, because people say, well, if my intention is to simply help, I'm not afraid of how I'm going to be perceived or if I'll be accepted or if people are going to respond to this, because I simply know that this information is going to help. So I have a responsibility as a professional to put it out there. Not because I'm motivated to make more money and do all these things. Those are fine, but people can see that. It's very easy to tell the difference between somebody who's simply genuinely interested in helping people, and business comes to them as a result of that. And then those people that are just trying to sell more courses and get more attention, likes, and those types of things.
No, I totally agree. And I found that interesting that you said the scripted message versus the off the cuff natural speech and being able to deliver a genuine message, because every now and then I put like notes up when I'm doing a solo because I don't have somebody to bounce stuff off of.
Yeah.
And the ones that I've done where I'm like reading the message, when I listen back to it, I go, that just doesn't sound like the way I talk, even though it is me talking.
Right.
It doesn't have the same cadence. It doesn't have the same volume of like fluctuations in my voice. I find myself being more robotic in my delivery, and it doesn't feel as sincere. And I don't know if everyone else picks up on that or if it's just me, because I know the way that my pattern of my voice sounds now that I've listened to myself talk a few times. But it's an interesting thought that, you know, when I'm delivering something, not writing it all out to read it, but giving myself points and giving myself freedom to expand upon them as I see fit, always flows more naturally for me.
Oh, yeah. That, and what I found helpful, I now record podcast segments for the Strength Coach podcast.
Okay.
What I have found helpful is, and this would apply to social media videos or YouTube videos, when I am saying something out loud, I tell myself that I'm recording it to send to one specific person. And I think about somebody that I know personally that fits into the category of the audience I want this message to go to. For instance, with my segment on the Strength Coach podcast, what I do is when I record myself saying my segment, I imagine that I'm saying it to one of the clients that I'm working with Fit to Speak. And I think about that person. I imagine that they're sitting in front of me and that I'm saying it to them just in a conversation. That seems to help. But you probably pick up on it much more than the people who hear you doing it, just like you said, because you now see the difference between the two. And maybe people pick up on a little bit. But even just the fact that you're aware of that, that's amazing, because now that's something that you can actually deliberately practice. Mm-hmm. Whereas most people aren't even aware that they sound different in certain situations. And if you're not aware, you're not getting better. Right. There's no chance of you getting better.
Right. No, it was really off-putting the first time I listened to it. I go, yeah, I wrote something down. I had a nice long list of points that I wanted to make, and I just kept going. And all of a sudden I was like, man, I got a whole episode here. Okay, I'll just read it off of here. And right. I tried to look at it and then look away and then look at it and look away, but it just turned into me reading, and it just didn't have the same feel at all. At least not to me. When I listened back, right. I was like, this is just, we're not going to do that. We're not doing that right. anymore.
It ends up sounding robotic.
Yeah. And that's exactly what it was. Or over rehearsed and not a genuine conversation, which is what I want for my listeners. I want it to sound, and I like the idea of thinking I'm giving my message to someone, because it makes it more it makes it more natural to talk. Because that was always the weird thing for me. I don't like the solo episodes for myself. I absolutely despise them.
It is challenging. Yeah. I think I coach such a wide array of people. I coach people who are super buttoned up formal business professionals. Mm-hmm. And then I'm coaching coaches. And it's interesting because what I've realized is those people are exposed to different formalities of communication all the time. Like, these executives are around formal sounding communication. Mm-hmm. And yet the best response that I get from everybody across the board is when I communicate in the same way that I would if we were sitting across the dinner table together and we were just having a conversation. And that's where that genuine and sincere comes from, is people need to like listening to you before they pay attention to the information you're sharing. If you come across as robotic, you have a rough sounding voice, you're monotone, there's not inflection, and you're not supporting your message with positive or active body language, you're not interesting or enjoyable to listen to. And that right away creates this barrier, and it doesn't matter what comes out of your mouth.
Right. People
are just saying, I don't like his voice. I don't like her voice. I don't like the way what she does with her head when she's doing this.
Yeah. So what would you give as far as, what would you tell someone who has a voice that doesn't have natural influxes and changes of tones, and they are monotone and they don't deliver a strong presented message? How would you help? What would we do to fix that? Because isn't that something that's just how they speak? Is there something we can do to help with that?
Your voice will always pretty much sound the same, but the level of inflection and emphasis and how you articulate your words, that's a practiced speech habit. Now, what I have found in my experience is that most people who are described as monotone or flat or sometimes boring is simply the fact that they're not speaking loud enough. Now, inflection is typically a play on volume. Okay. The louder you speak, naturally, there will be more inflection in your voice. I've coached thousands of people now, though I have never once coached somebody that they are too loud. Almost everybody that I've coached is too soft, and I'm asking them to speak up. To make this more tangible, imagine volume on a 1 to 10 scale. 1 is a whisper, 10 is a shout, or you're yelling. When you address a group of people, or you are communicating virtually, meaning maybe you're communicating on a Zoom call, or you're recording a video for social media or YouTube, you should be at an 8. That's your goal, is to speak at an 8 on a 10 scale. If you compare that to your one-on-one volume, typically when you're communicating one-on-one in person, your volume is somewhere, but for most people, between a 4 and a 6. What happens is when they go to address a group of people or when they film a video of themselves, they stick in the volume that they're comfortable with, because most of the time we're just having a one-on-one conversation. We do it more often than we address groups. When you address a group though, that volume is much too low. People not only have a hard time hearing you, there's no inflection in your voice. And that's where we start to get that, where people think, well, this is really boring. It's she doesn't, or he doesn't seem interested in what they're saying. So the number one fix for most people is simply just to push your volume up to a place where it feels uncomfortable for you. If it feels uncomfortable for you, you're probably in the right spot.
That's interesting. I think I might be talking a little too low here. So as far as like my volume, because that's the interesting thing, because I wouldn't say that I'm at an 8 right now. I would say that I'm probably sitting more in my casual 6 range, but
Okay.
It'd be interesting to see, like, if I were to just start to project my voice louder, if it would make a more pleasant conversation for my listeners to listen to. Mm-hmm. So
now let me just say this. Since last June, I've probably coached a few hundred people virtually. That gives me a big pool of people to compare your voice against. If I were coaching you right now, I would say that your volume is at a 7 or an 8 based on the pool of people that I listen to speak.
Well, that's good.
Now,
maybe.
Yeah. The big with the volume, when I say an 8, that's not me telling people to yell. There is a difference between yelling and projecting your voice. The two tricks that I tell people are, if you are addressing a group of people in a physical space, speak to the person that is physically farthest away from you first. And if you know that they can hear you clearly without any problems, your volume will likely be in the right place. Virtually, speak as if the people that you're speaking to are hard of hearing.
That makes sense.
Because if I am speaking too loud, I know that you can simply turn the volume down on your laptop. But just even if you turn the volume down on your laptop, you still get the benefits of all of the inflection and the emphasis and the articulation that is coming across in my voice that's powered by how much I'm projecting my volume.
That makes sense. And I think maybe my voice projects because of the coaching in me. Maybe probably. I talk, it doesn't feel like I'm talking loud, but because I've been coaching people for so long that I'm trying to make sure my voice is loud enough for the people in the group to hear, I'm naturally projecting a louder voice than I would have otherwise thought I was. So that's possible. That's good to hear that you think that I'm at a volume loud enough that it's giving the right inflections and that sort of thing. So
yeah, I would say don't spend your energy practicing your volume, because then that's just wasted energy. You're great.
All right, good to know. And do you feel like when somebody projects their voice the right amount, it makes it feel like they're excited or energetic about the information they're giving as well?
100%.
Okay, because I think that's another thing that I feel like when you talk low and you're monotone, it almost feels like you're unsure or you're not really excited about the information you're giving. And it kind of then leads again back into the boring part, because if you're not excited about telling what you're telling, why should I be excited to listen to it?
That's right. Well, let me make note of something. Right now, I would say, are speaking at an 8. This entire time that you've been speaking, what I've noticed is that you also have your hands up and you're gesturing a lot. So try this. Try speaking at a 5 and try and gesture a lot, the same amount that you've been gesturing.
I don't know I don't know if I could actually.
They don't go together. It's completely counterintuitive. Somebody who is speaking at a low volume, you will almost never see their hands doing much of anything or their body. There's no energy in their body. You can't speak at a low volume and have your hands up painting a picture of your words or moving around. What happens is the people that I coach that come into some of the programs that I do, they'll be at a 6 or 5 or a 6. And I'll say, okay, as they're going, I'll interrupt them and say, I want you to push your volume up 2 notches to an 8. I want you to feel like you're yelling at me. As soon as they do that, the number one thing that happens is their hands come up and they start moving their hands.
I love that.
Now I don't have to coach them on their hands because their hands are doing what they're supposed to be doing. Your volume is a great place for a lot of people to start, because there's a lot of extra benefits that happen without me having to tell them to do it.
That's fantastic. And that this is a great way for information to get out about communication for my audience. And I think that this is going to be something that I'm going to come circle back on with some more people, because I think the communication piece, like I mentioned before we got started, is a piece that allows us to connect our thoughts to the message that we're giving. And it makes the information so much more enjoyable to listen to if you can communicate it clearly and with purpose and under control, and not just a rambling sound of words coming together.
That's right. And a lot of people that reach out to me for coaching, they want to get better at communication because they have a lot of good ideas. They have information they want to share, but they're too scared to share it because they don't think they're going to do a good job. And I bet there's a lot of people out there who feel that same way. If you can, especially if you're a gym owner, or if you have professional peers that you work on professional growth with, challenge one another to improve your communication, because an indirect benefit of doing that is you'll see a lot more people step forward and be willing to share the ideas that they have and the information or messages that they feel are important, simply because they have the confidence to say it out loud. Most people just don't share things because they don't think they're going to do a good job sharing it. So they end up just keeping it to themselves. Communication is the vehicle to get you there. It's like, I used an analogy once that was, would you buy a Lamborghini if it didn't have an engine in it? No, but that's the equivalent of you having all of this knowledge and experience in whatever your profession is, and not having the engine to do something with it, for it to be productive for you in some sense. And that's communication. It's the engine that allows you to put what you know and what you're able to do into a product or a service, and it to actually get out there and help people.
I love that. That's awesome. And so to feed off of that information right there, for the people listening at home, how can they connect with you, follow you? Do you have some areas in which you want to share with my audience so that they can see what you're doing and maybe even start to work with you in a coaching setting? So would you like to share that now?
Of course. Yes. The best place to go would be to my website, which is www.fit-to-speak.com. My contact information is in there. I am in the process right now. I am just working with people one-on-one, and that's open. I am working on putting together more of a cohort program, like a 6 to 8 week cohort program. So I can get a group of people together and we can feed off of one another, and they can experience coaching in a group setting, which is valuable. So follow me. You can go to my website, or you can follow me on Instagram. It's just fit_to_speak. And all of the information about upcoming programs will be put there. But those two places, the website and Instagram, would be great.
Okay, awesome. I'll make sure I put that in the show notes. Again, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us. I've really enjoyed the conversation that we had. It's got a lot of things for me to start to think about and look at, and not only help myself, but help those that I'm working with understand what they're saying and how they're saying it.
You are welcome. Thank you for having me on, Charles. And just to say, you're fantastic. Your skills are really good.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that, because it's something that I'm working really hard to be good at. And it's always good to hear positive feedback when you're unsure of what you're delivering, because I've only been doing this for about 31 episodes now. So it's not very long. So as always, guys, keep reaching for the skies, fall flat on your face. But remember, whenever we fall, always get up. Thank you for joining us today on the Edge of Greatness podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and join us again next time as we continue to dig deeper into the key components of greatness. The path to greatness is never linear, so remember to keep pursuing greatness no matter what. Keep stretching your abilities, reach for the stars, and fall flat on your face. But no matter what happens, remember, whenever we fall, always get up. Until next time, I'm Charles Schultz, and this was the Edge of Greatness podcast. Thank you for listening to today's episode. Please take a moment now to subscribe, rate, and review our show. We are all on the edge of greatness.